inside the Washington Day School lobby. I'd heard there were supposed to be African kids, the children of diplomats at the private school, but I didn't see any. Just clusters of shocked teachers, children, parents, police. People were crying openly on the front lawns and inside the school's lobby. 2 little kids, 2 little babies had been kidnapped from one of Washington's most prestigious private schools. I understood that it was a sad, tragic day for everybody involved. Leave it at that, I told myself. Just do your job. We went about our police business. We tried to suppress the fury we were feeling, but it wasn't easy. I kept seeing the sad eyes of little Mustaph Sanders. A uniform told us we were wanted in the headmaster's office. Chief of Detectives Pittman was there, waiting for us. "Be cool," Sampson advised. "Live to fight another day." George Pittman usually wears a gray or blue business suit on the job. He favors pinstripe dress shirts and striped silver and blue neckties. He's a Johnson & Murphy shoe and belt man. His gray hair is always slicked back so it fits his bullet head like a tight helmet. He is known as the Jefe, the boss of bosses, Il Duce, B. Pitts, Georgie Porgy. I think I know when my trouble with Chief of Detectives Pittman began. It was after the Washington Post ran that story on me in the Sunday magazine section. The piece detailed how I was a psychologist, but working homicide and major crimes in D.C. I had told the reporter why I continued to live in the Southeast. It makes me feel good to live where I live. Nobody's going to drive me out of my own house. Actually, I think it was the title chosen for the article that pushed Chief Pittman and some others in the department over the edge. The young journalist had interviewed my grandmother while researching the piece. Nana had been an English teacher, and the impressionable writer ate that up. Nana had proceeded to fill his head with her notion that because black people are basically traditionalists, they would logically be the very last people in the South to give up religion, morals, and even formal manners. She said that I was a true Southern man, having been born in North Carolina. She also questioned why it was that we idolized near-psychotic detectives in films, TV, books, and newspaper articles. The title of the piece, which ran over my brooding photograph, was The Last Southern Gentleman. The story caused big problems inside our very uptight department. Chief Pittman especially took offense. I couldn't prove it, but I believed the story had been placed by someone in the mayor's office. I gave a 1-2-3 rap on the door of the headmaster's office, and Sampson and I walked in. Before I could say a word, Pittman held up his right hand. "Cross, you just listen to what I have to say," he said as he came over to us. "There's been a kidnapping at this school. It's a major kidnapping. That's a real bad thing," I put it in immediately. "Unfortunately, a killer has also struck the Condon Terrace and Langley neighborhoods. The killer's hit 2 times already. 6 people are dead so far. Sampson and I are the senior people on that case. Basically, we're it. I'm apprised of the situation in the Condon and Langley projects. I've already made contingencies. It's taken care of," Pittman said. 2 black women had their breasts sliced off this morning. Their pubic hair was shaved while they were tied up in bed. Were you apprised of that? I asked him. A 3-year-old boy was murdered in his pajamas. I was shouting again. I glanced at Sampson and saw him shaking his head. A group of teachers in the office looked our way. 2 young black women had their breasts sliced off, I repeated for their benefit. Someone's wandering around D.C. this morning with breasts in his pocket. Chief Pittman gestured toward the headmaster's inner office. He wanted the 2 of us inside the room. I shook my head. I wanted to have witnesses when I was around him. "I know what you're thinking, Cross." He lowered his voice and spoke very close to my face. The odor of stale cigarettes billowed out at me. "You think I'm out to get you, but I'm not. I know you're a good cop. I know your heart's usually in the right place. No, you don't know what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm thinking. 6 black people are dead already. A crazed homicidal killer is out there. He's in heat. He's sharpening his eye teeth. Now 2 white kids have been kidnapped, and that's a horrible thing. Horrible. But I'm already on a fucking case." Pittman suddenly jabbed his index finger at me. His face was very red. "I decide what cases you're on. I decide. You're experienced as a hostage negotiator. You're a psychologist. We have other people to send into Langley and Condon. Besides, Mayor Monroe has specifically asked for you." So that was it. Now I understood everything. Our mayor had intervened. It was all about me. "What about Sampson? At least leave him on the project murders," I said to the chief of detectives. "You got any complaints, take them up with the mayor. You're both working on this kidnapping. That's all I have to say to you at this time." Pittman turned his back on us and walked away. We were on the Dunn-Goldberg kidnapping case, like it or not. We didn't like it. "Maybe we should just go back to the Sanders house," I said to Sampson. "Nobody miss us here," he agreed. Chapter 7. A gleaming black BMW K1 motorcycle squeezed between the low fieldstone gates of the Washington Day School. The driver was ID'd, then the bike sped down a long, narrow road toward a gray cluster of school buildings. It was 11 o'clock. The BMW K1 streaked to 60 in the few seconds it took to get to the administration building. The motorcycle then braked easily and smoothly, barely throwing gravel. The rider slid it in behind a pearl-gray Mercedes stretch limousine with diplomat's plates DP-101. Still seated on the bike, Jessie Flanagan pulled off a black helmet to reveal longish blonde hair. She looked to be in her late 20s. Actually, she'd turned 32 that summer. Life was threatening to pass her right by. She was a relic now, ancient history, she believed. She had come straight to the school from her lake cottage, not to mention her first vacation in 29 months. That latter fact helped to explain her style of dress that morning. The leather bike jacket, the faded black jeans with leg warmers, thick leather belt, the red and black checkered lumberman's shirt, and the worn engineering boots. 2 D.C. policemen rushed up on either side of her. "It's okay, officers," she said. "Here's my ID." After eyeing the identification, they backed away quickly and became solicitous. "You can go right in," one of them said. "There's a side door just around those high hedges, Miss Flanagan." Jessie Flanagan managed a friendly smile for the 2 harried-looking policemen. "I don't exactly look the part today, I know. I was on my vacation. I raced the bike. I raced it here." Jessie Flanagan took the shortcut across a pristine lawn that was lightly coated with frost. She disappeared inside the school's administration building. Neither of the D.C. policemen took his eyes off her until she was gone. Her blonde hair blew like streamers in the stiff winter wind. She was definitely stunning to look at, even in dirty jeans and work boots. And she had a very powerful job. They both knew that from her ID. She was a player. As she made her way through the front lobby, someone grabbed at her. Someone caught a piece of Jessie Flanagan, which was typical of her life in D.C. Victor Schmidt had hooked onto her arm. Once upon a time, and this was difficult for Jessie to imagine now, Victor had been her partner. Her first, in fact. Now he was assigned to one of the students at the day school. Victor was short and balding, a stylish GQ sort of dresser, confident for no particularly good reason. He'd always struck her as misplaced in the Secret Service, maybe better suited for lower rungs of the diplomatic corps. "Jessie, how's it going?" he half-whispered, half-spoke. He never seemed to go all the way on anything, she remembered. That had always bugged her. Jessie Flanagan blew up. Later she realized she had really been on edge when Schmidt stopped her. Not that she needed an excuse for the flare-up. Not that morning. Not under the circumstances. "Vic, do you know that 2 children have been taken from this school, maybe kidnapped?" she snapped. "One is the Secretary of Treasury's son, the other is Catherine Rose's little girl. The actress Catherine Rose Dunn. How do you think I'm doing? I'm a little sick to my stomach. I'm angry. I'm also petrified." "I just meant hello. Hello, Jessie. I know what the hell has happened here." But Jessie Flanagan had already walked away, at least partly to keep from saying anything else to Victor. She did feel nervous, and ill, and mostly wired as hell. She wasn't so much looking for familiar faces in the crowded school lobby as the right faces. There were 2 of them now. Charlie Chakley and Mike Devine, her agents. The 2 men she had assigned to young Michael Goldberg and also Maggie Rose Dunn, since they traveled back and forth to school together. How could this happen? Her voice was loud. She didn't care that the talk nearby had stopped and people were staring. A black hole was cut into the noise and chaos of the school lobby. Then she lowered her voice to a whisper as she questioned the agents about what had happened so far. She listened quietly as she let them explain. Apparently, she didn't like what they had to say. "Get the hell out of here," she exploded a second time. "Get out, right now, out of my sight." "There was nothing we could have done," Charlie Chakley tried to protest. "What could we have done? Jesus Christ!" Then he and Devine skulked away. Those who knew Jessie Flanagan might have understood her emotional reaction. 2 children were missing. It had happened on her watch. She was an immediate supervisor of the Secret Service agents who guarded just about everyone other than the president, key cabinet members and their families, about half dozen senators, including Ted Kennedy. She reported to the Secretary of the Treasury himself. She had worked unbelievably hard to get all that trust and responsibility, and she was responsible. 100-hour weeks, no vacation year after year, no life to speak of. She could hear the upcoming scuttlebutt before it happened. 2 of her agents had royally screwed up. There would be an investigation, an old-fashioned witch hunt. Jessie Flanagan was on the hot seat. Since she was the first woman ever to hold her job, the fall, if it came, would be steep and painful and very public. She finally spotted the one person she'd been looking for in the crowd and hoping not to find. Secretary of the Treasury Gerald Goldberg had already arrived at his son's school. Standing with the secretary were Mayor Carl Monroe, an FBI special agent she knew named Roger Graham, and 2 black men she didn't recognize right off. Both of the blacks were tall, one of them extremely so, huge. Jessie Flanagan took a deep breath and then walked quickly over to Secretary Goldberg and the others. "I'm very sorry, Gerald," she said in a whisper as she arrived. "I'm sure the children will be found." A teacher was all Gerald Goldberg could manage. He shook his head of close-cropped white curls. His eyes were wet and shiny. A teacher of children. Little babies. How could this happen? He was clearly heartbroken. The secretary looked 10 years older than his actual age, which was 49. His face was as white as the school's stucco walls. Before coming to Washington, Gerald Goldberg had been at Salomon Brothers on Wall Street. He'd made 20 or 30 million in the prosperous, thoroughly crazy 1980s. He was bright, world-wise, and tested on his wisdom. He was as pragmatic as they came. On this day, though, he was just the father of a kidnapped little boy, and he looked extremely fragile. Chapter 8. I was talking to Roger Graham from the FBI when the Secret Service supervisor, Jessie Flanagan, joined our group. She said what she could to comfort Secretary Goldberg. Then the talk quickly turned back to the apparent kidnapping and the next steps to be taken. "Are we 100% sure it was this math teacher who took the children?" Graham asked the group. He and I had worked closely together before. Graham was extremely smart and had been a star in the Bureau for years. He'd co-written a book about busting up organized crime in New Jersey. It had been made into a hit movie. We respected and liked each other, which is rare between the Bureau and local police. When my wife had been killed in Washington, Roger had gone out of his way to involve the Bureau in the investigation. He'd given me more help than my own department. I decided to try to answer Roger Graham's question. I'd calmed down enough to talk by then, and I told them what Sampson and I had picked up so far. They definitely left the school grounds together, I said. A porter saw them. The math teacher, a Mr. Saniji, went to Ms. Kim's class. He lied to her, said there was a telephone threat and that he was supposed to take the kids to the headmaster's office to be driven home. Said the Secret Service hadn't specified whether the threat involved the boy or girl. He just kept on going with them. The kids trusted him enough to go along. How could a potential kidnapper possibly get on the teaching staff of this kind of school? The special agent asked. A pair of sunglasses peeked from the breast pocket of his suit. Winter shades. Harrison Ford had played him in the movie made from his book. It wasn't bad casting, really. Sampson called Graham Big Screen. That we don't know yet, I told Graham. We will soon. Sampson and I were finally introduced to Secretary Goldberg by Mayor Monroe. Monroe did a little bit on how we were one of D.C.'s most decorated detective teams and so on and so forth. Then the mayor ushered the secretary inside the headmaster's office. Special Agent Graham trailed along. He rolled his eyes at Sampson and me. He wanted us to know it wasn't his show. Jessie Flanagan stayed behind. "I've heard about you, Detective Cross. Now that I think of it, you're the psychologist. There was an article in the Washington Post." She smiled nicely, a demi-smile. I didn't smile back. "You know newspaper articles," I told her. "Usually a pack